So a friend of mine sent me a message, and in the message he asked the question, would the people who are pro-lockdown be also pro-national service? Now, the guy asking the question is not just anybody. He's been to, as he puts it, two wars, although some of us might consider them two theatres of the same war. Which kind of opens up a question like, why would we describe the location of a bloody and violent conflict as something so genteel as a theatre? So if I can if you allow me to sort of segue into this for a little minute, it might be relevant later on. But so a theatre, if we look at it, you've got an audience and they're at one remove from the action, and behind the action you might have a series of changing backdrops, or the players on the stage involved in the performance are kind of guided by the directions of an unseen or hidden hand, and when the play is over they may sort of struggle for something that might replace the intensity of the action or the highs of the performance, and find themselves, with drink or drug problems sometimes, some of them. But also, very rarely does the audience get to play any kind of role in the performance, or very rarely does the performance on the stage spill out into the auditorium in amongst the spectators, and that's the role that we find ourselves in. And to sort of engage with the performance in a theatre, you also have to, in some way, suspend your disbelief in order to think that it all has merit and purpose in the first place. So let's return back to his question about would you be, if you're pro-lockdown, would you also be pro-national service? If we think about that a little bit. Now, once I was, we're on Port Meadow, by the way. This is Port Meadow, which is like a floodplain inside the Ring Road in Oxford. It's quite big, and there's everyone out enjoying the sun further down there by the river, and it's been common grazing land for many centuries, possibly even millennia. There's some story that King Alfred gave it to the people of Oxford for helping him fight off the marauding Danes in the 10th century, but apparently King Alfred wasn't around in the 10th century, he's around in the 9th century. But in any event, it's mentioned in the Doomsday Book in 1086, so people have been free to let their animals graze here for such a long time. The livestock has been free to move about on here, but in recent times police were moving off the human livestock for the sin of sitting here in the sunshine. So but yeah, one of the policemen I spoke to about that kind of law enforcement was in a park, and he said to me that one of his reasons when explaining what he was doing was that he lived in a democracy, and as such there were laws, and because there were laws, his job was to enforce them, and that's what he was doing. So that's a fairly good reason in a way, if you believe all those things. So returning to our question, eventually we'll get there. If you are pro-lockdown, would you also be pro-national service? Well, all the same things would apply. So if you have the trust in your government to do what is right for you, then you'll be pro-lockdown. But we know in this country, particularly in this country, for some reason it has a lot of resonance, is the claims of mass destruction, the weapons of mass destruction that led us to engage in wars in Iraq in particular, to a lesser degree in Afghanistan. But we now know those claims are untrue. There's information that's come out subsequently in things like the Chilcot Report, which say that people like Bush and Blair were corresponding about the wars they wanted to engage in before those claims were made. And there's a general suspicion of the motives and an understanding that we were misled in this country about the particular war in Iraq. So most people here probably wouldn't trust their government to, in the sense that they wouldn't want their children or themselves to be led into war. So in that instance, they wouldn't trust the government. But in the instance of lockdown, they seem very happy to engage with it and to partake in it, and to, there's been incidences of snitching, and a general sizable portion of the population is very much engaged in it and giving their full trust to the government. in the instance of lockdown. Now, why is that if they wouldn't trust the government to lead them into war? Now, part of the reason, I think, I mean, you could argue it's different governments. For me, it seems fairly similar because they all sort of perpetuate the war of terror is ongoing, so it hasn't stopped. There is a kind of continuous thread running through the government. But one of the reasons I think that they're more inclined to support something like the lockdown measures than they would be if they were asked to send their children to war would be because it's safer. So you get to maybe do a few Zoom meetings, maybe have some education at home, maybe watch a bit of Netflix, maybe you're on furlough, maybe you're still getting paid. So the sense of immediate danger is not there for people, so they're quite happy to engage with lockdown on that basis. Another parallel you could add is that the danger is being faced by other people. So poorer people, maybe. There is a sense to which poorer people are those who, not always obviously, but those to which the army finds its recruits. It's generally working class men become squaddies, or there is a sense to which that is the case. But in any event, poorer people, other people, are being sent to the front lines in both the instance of war and in the instance of lockdown. So the danger is not felt. So there's an inclination, like if there is something out there that's going to be troublesome or perilous, to allow other people to deal with it. That people feel safe and they feel content to allow things to play out in that respect, which is interesting, isn't it? So now another thing I'd like to say there, though, because if we look at the way that people would trust their government when not for any sort of rational reason, it's just because just in the instance because it's not threatening. They don't think it's threatening them to stay at home. Or the information they're presented with tells them it's not threatening to stay at home, even though there is a case for lockdown killing more people than it saves. There is something else where in the Gulf War, the first one, because when you go in, you give your mind and your body over to government with complete trust as a soldier, hoping that you are going to be led and not misled. You are then put in situations of danger and you're put in situations of combat and all these things. But also, in the first Gulf War, they injected the soldiers or gave them pills to ostensibly protect them from any diseases or they would come up against in Iraq. But there is now a strong suspicion that didn't help them at all and gave them some serious side effects, which is known as Gulf War syndrome. So when we think about the way in which we give our trust, I think that's well worth bearing in mind. So there you go, a few thoughts for today. Take care.